So basically, I'm just going to go through this whole piece, color all maps new, and talk about as much text painting as I can fit in before the sun goes down and the light looks bad. So all along the coast, reeds are laid down by wind. My whole idea here is that it's like a telegram report. And so it's just one dynamic, everyone's singing together. It's like just reporting on a natural disaster. It's just delivering information. Soft breeze and shallow surf. Lowland, my children will never see. So literally everyone is singing really low in their range, which is conveying like how low the land is and how it's all muddy and covered up with water. And of course, because everyone's singing so low, it's also quiet, which kind of conveys the quietness of an uninhabited place. Each tide a quiet goodbye. So we've got the basses and tenors having this motif that rises and falls, which is supposed to convey like the tide coming in and out, and they overlap each other. So it's this idea of these tides going in and out and rolling over each other. Pelicans refuse to leave their nests closer together each season. I wrote to sing this Morse code like because again, I'm trying to just like I'm trying to deliver information. So this isn't super emotional. This is, even though it feels emotional because we're talking about like habitats being destroyed, but I was going for more of like a didactic, informational, just like delivering information. These are facts, you know, this isn't hyperbole. Oh, this is cool. Soon enough, storms will brew offshore. So the idea here is that we have each part coming in with that sentence. Soon enough, storms will brew offshore. And as the parts are adding up, it's getting louder. And then we actually have some aleatory here where each individual singer will sing, soon enough, storms will brew offshore. And the combination of all of the singers singing this, plus like the different sections coming in, plus a dynamic crescendo, this idea that the storm that is brewing offshore is it's impending, right? It's coming for us. It's coming closer and closer. And of course, when we come to unison at the end, water, it's fortissimo, it's totally unison. It's depicting water as this huge force that, as it decrescendos, will color all maps new. We're seeing that the water comes in and is destroying these places, and then what's left is nothing, which is why we end pianissimo for this movement. What if I turn on other lights? Does that help at all? Okay, we're on a movement tour. The horizon releases just enough light. The tenors and basses are starting on the same note, which is representing the horizon. And then on the word light, that's when they split. The tenors come up and it creates a major second, which is like a really lovely dissonance. And that is to represent the light coming up over the horizon. And then as it goes on to wake the surface of the lake, now that major second, which just represented light, which will come back later, by the way, now it's representing the surface of the lake. And what we have is the altos here, they're dipping from that B up into the G. So they're like popping out of the lake, and then they do this little wiggly figure to show kind of like the lake waking up. Of course, and climb into the very top. Everyone is getting higher and higher. We have chromaticism to, we've got some half-step ascension to kind of illustrate the pace of the climbing. Climb to the very top so that its leaves and branches look newborn against starry sky. We're modulating here to convey the meaning of the word newborn, right? We're in a new key. And also the chords are very big to illustrate the breadth of the sky. And we've got this half step from F sharp and G. We've got this half step dissonance up here, which my intention was for it to twinkle a little bit. That interval kind of twinkles a lot to me, and to have that twinkling represent all the stars in the sky. And then you've got staggered articulation of that word, starry sky, 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 which also represents all of the different stars in the sky. I know this photograph is of a real place. The idea here is that the narrator is getting wrapped into thinking that this photograph is a metaphor for something dark that is coming. And right now, he's trying to convince himself, and he's trying to say, oh, I know that this photograph is of a real place. And so we're stripping the texture down to just 3 soloists to give it this kind of very personal, like get out of this big voicing and into like focus, grounding yourself, kind of like grounding yourself. A swamp not too far from home. Of course, tenors and basses, everyone's singing very low here, which is to convey this idea of the swamp, but it's stinginess of light. So we have them singing quietly to represent the little amount of light, and we've also added the C sharp in, which kind of brightens the tonality a little bit. And then on the word light, right here on the word light, we have what? A major second, which is the same interval that we used here to convey, right here to convey light, is this major second. It raises the devil of metaphor. So we've got altos and basses in an octave, which to me just feels very like creepy and spooky, that voicing, I don't know why. I can't chase away with knowledge. Of course, we get this big chord to convey, the anxiousness that he's feeling. A major versus E minor dichotomy, which to me creates kind of a borrowed chord, kind of a modal feeling. That it's dark is just dark. So here we've got kind of a call and response thing. The bass is singing this solo, and then everyone responds trying to affirm it, and then the bass is singing it again. And this kind of calls back on this little solo section where the narrator is trying to reground himself. I know this photograph is of a real place. We have the same thing here where he's saying, oh, the darkness in this photo is not a metaphor for something evil coming to hurt me and my family and everyone I love. It's just darkness. It's literally just darkness. And so he's saying that to himself, but he doesn't quite believe it, which is why we're using the whole group as affirmation in this way. For Big Sky, of course, we have this huge chord to represent how huge the sky is, and more so how impending this feeling is. And then right after this huge, full voice chord, we have a soloist singing in falsetto, a very delicate part of the voice singing Is Only Sky. It's kind of this feeble attempt to relegate the perceived metaphor to mere coincidence. This is a reductive sentiment saying, oh, it's not danger, it's only sky. The big sky is only sky. And so because the sentiment is reductive, the voicing also reduces to just a soloist. I tell myself this tree is alone on the water. So this harkens back to the very beginning, the horizon releases. It's the same voicing, same notes. I tell myself this tree is alone on the water. The tenors and basses are in unison to represent the lonely tree. And then they spread out here to represent the water around the tree. And then when they say the word loneliness, the basses actually drop out. And this is something I like to do a lot. I like to pull the low end out on a pivotal dramatic word or moment, because to me it kind of gives this feeling of like pulling the floor out from underneath you. Oh, this part's wild. This light is fading, but is not lost. So the chords here are, we got a whole thing going on. So the whole harmonic progression actually shows how he is trying to convince himself, but doesn't actually believe himself. So the D major chord on not is like giving us hope. You would think that when you have a D major in C, it's because you're going to G. But what we're doing is we're actually going to an A minor chord, which is the 2 of G. But then when we hit B dominant here, because you're taking what you'd think would be a minor 3 chord, a B minor from G major, which is where the F sharp, the F sharp and D major was, tricking us into believing we were going to go. We're adding this B here, but then making it major to actually treat it more like a 5 of 6. So all in just one bar. This F sharp here is part of a D major chord, which in the context of having previously been in C major, is taking us to G, but we subvert that by taking us to the 2 of G, A minor, which actually ends up being the 4 of E minor, which we then go to the 5 of E minor, which is the B major. Even though I don't have a dominant here, but in context, to me it feels very B major. So we're actually going straight to E minor, which is a mediant, some kind of mediant modulation from C. But, well, maybe it's chromatic mediant, I'm not sure. Anyway, but the idea is that, like, because this guy's trying to convince himself, but he doesn't believe himself. And so the modulations are there to try and push us in one direction, but the truth is pushing us back in another direction, which is kind of the whole idea with that harmonic progression. These leaves are green because they are leaves. So there's 2 things going on in here. The shape of this section is of leaves falling down, right? So they're up here, they go down, they come back up, down, up, etc. And that's just straight up text painting. Like the text is about leaves, and so I wrote it in a shape of leaves doing a thing that leaves do, which is fall. The second thing is that this section is actually a quote from the music of a Ghibli film. And I did that because Hayao Miyazaki, in his films, there's a lot of themes of environmentalism, which is also one of the big themes in this choral suite. If you know what movie I'm quoting here, then put it in the comments, because I'd be curious if anybody notices it. And then the very end, no need to say more than that. This is super quick, and this is another modulatory thing. It's a dismissive line. No need to say more than that. And so I wanted to use a half cadence and a quick half cadence to kind of represent how we're not trying to think about it too much. And because the sentiment does not come to a conclusion, the half cadence, we don't have a harmonic conclusion either, right? It ends on a 5 essentially. Space release. Okay, I am teaching my son to throw. I've got this line broken into segments, right? The idea here is that it's representing what's called a skill progression. And so when you teach someone in sports how to do a complex move, you have to break that into tiny parts. And so the idea here is that this is what the dad is doing. I am teaching my son. Okay, let's add on the next part. I am teaching my son to throw. And then you can see right here we jump straight into a melisma, because if you're not an experienced coach, it can actually be difficult to articulate a skill progression. And so what's happening here is it's like when you're trying to show somebody something and you're like, oh, I think you do it like this and this, and then you're like, okay, I can't articulate this. So you say, all right, let me just show you. And then he just shows him, I am teaching my son to throw into space. So the immediate slowdown and sustaining of the word space conveys both of the 2 possible meanings that I see in the poem for the word space. One is throwing a ball so good that it breaks the atmosphere and floats out into space and is weightless. And so we've got these chords kind of conveying that weightlessness. But it's also space in the sense that you're throwing a ball to someone, but because the person you're throwing at is running, that if you throw it at the person as you see them, you will be throwing into nothingness because they've already run past where you originally threw the ball. And so the idea of space as emptiness, which is why these notes are sustained and kind of held at, like there's no motion anymore. He sees motion and color. So for motion, this is pretty obvious. The triplets convey motion, like the ball, or the person that the target they're throwing at is like blurring. And then for the word color, you can see we've got a key change here, and we get a new fresh chord. I think it's a mediant modulation. And that, of course, conveys color because it's just like literally a new color in the tonality. Okay, this was a crowd favorite. Releases the ball toward what's no longer there. So this rhythm actually mimics the rhythm of a ball missing its target and slowly bouncing to a stop.
Releases though?
Because what happened? The son threw the ball and it missed the target, so it just fell to the ground and awkwardly bounced to a stop. And that's actually also why we have this long... I think I had a fermata here at some point, but the idea was that there was like an awkward pause after this bounce. Always behind his target. So here I have what I call a lagging rhythm, which will come back later. But it's this idea that the son is not... He's doing the correct motion, but his timing is off. He's earlier than when he is supposed to throw. And so what we have here is the basses representing the dad. They're singing like, go now. And then the sopranos and altos are always 2 beats behind. And it's just conveying that the son is always behind his target. So his feet pat grass in rhythm, motion and delivery, good, all good, all good. So there's 2 things going on here. One, there's in repeating this motion, in repeating this line, I'm kind of using this as affirmation from the dad to the son to be like, no, you're not a bad athlete. Like, these are the things you're doing well. And then over top, the tenors and basses repeating that rhythm, the sopranos and altos are singing this kind of canon that puts them in dissonance with each other a lot. And the idea is that, while this hustling, bustling rhythm is going underneath, the dad is like trying to figure it out. So this is also him thinking, like the cogs turning in his head. It's like, could be that. So here, delivery good, the motion is good, delivery good. This is kind of like a 2/3 rhythmic vibe here. And I'm trying to convey athleticism. And so this rhythm of like, the motion is good, delivery good, the motion is good, it's this idea of like, no, this kid is athletic. Like he's able to change positions quickly. And in my mind, I'm kind of seeing like a tennis player doing split steps around the court. So it's to convey athleticism. So I thought this line, 14 years old, this is a very bittersweet chord. It's an E major 7 in first inversion to really give it like a sweetness, and then up top we have this open 5th with the 7th, the minor 2nd, actually nestled in the middle. And I went with something really bittersweet because in just this, these 3 words, 14 years old, I felt like there was so much meaning packed into that. So the dad is talking about his kid being like, oh, my kid's 14 years old, and oh, he's doing all the 14-year-old things. But it's also like, wow, my kid is already 14 years old. Like, time is not stopping. He's getting older and older. But it's also like, oh, he's only 14 years old. And then it's also like the dad looking back, reflecting on his 14-year-old self and kind of the bittersweetness of those times past, and maybe projecting some of it on his kid in like a very loving way. So there's just a lot there. And this chord actually comes back a couple of times, and we'll talk about that later. We've got this big long fermata, and then the tempo picks up. And so looking forward to drinking, girls, driving. And we've got that lag rhythm from earlier, because for a couple reasons. One, because the son is excited to grow up and to do all these fun things, but also because he's like moving a little faster than he needs to. And so we have, again, this rhythmic offset. Okay, and the rest of this page, like, there's a lot going on. So we've got so ready, which is unison, because it's like, all right, buckle up, let's go. We're all on the train. To haul off, which I thought was a very like maritime articulation, like a sailor almost. To haul off. Toward the open arms. This should be really molto writ. I'm picturing like the tremendous arms of the future of destiny just opening up. And so it's a huge chord. It's everyone's, in a part of their register where there can be kind of loud. And we've got the suspension, and it's slowing down, and it's tenuity all the way. Open arms. The horizon extends. It's the same exact chord. It's the same exact chord as up here, except it's voiced higher in everyone's range, just for more volume and to give it more power. And the idea also of it being the same exact chord, just voiced a little differently, is that it's connecting the son's 14-year-old self with his aspirational future self. And of course, extends is that same bittersweet chord. It's the E major 7 in first inversion, with the minor 2nd, see the E, the D sharp there right in the middle, and the open 5th up top, just to give this big, like, soaring feeling of like possibility in the future. And then of course when we get to just out of view, it decrescendos, because it's like you're seeing the sun slowly disappear over the horizon, just out of view. Where will he go? It's bittersweet. It's like you want your kid to go on and to live an amazing life, but it's hard to let people go sometimes. How miserable, how hard it is. So the dad, like, he just had this very emotional gushing moment, and then now he's pulling it back to like, ugh, but I still have to teach him how to freaking throw, and it sucks because he's not getting it. And so we have the lag rhythm again. How miserable, and that goes all the way to the end. Number 4, Gulf Waves. Okay, so this is like very simple text painting. I was looking at this poem more as like a painting, almost like a portrait of a family. And so like I really wanted to stretch things out and make it almost like you were looking at a painting. So for the beginning, we've got sopranos and altos singing Big Moon. There's a lot of major second dissonance going on. And the idea is that the natural interference pattern, the natural beating that happens when you have a dissonance, is to kind of give what would otherwise seem as like a stagnant moment, to give it this energy of gentle winds and waves and just like the kind of, it's like sound design for a quiet day at the beach, almost, is kind of what I was going for. And we've got half the section humming and half on words. And again, this is the idea that you get like a different overtone situation whenever you are humming a note rather than singing it through an open vowel. And it's also to kind of lower the volume a little bit and make it a little fuzzy and kind of just like an impressionist painting, almost, is kind of what I was going for. And the energy being kind of laid back, the idea is that the parents in this painting, the parents are actually sat back a ways from the shore and they're watching their daughter from a distance. And it's almost like they're being like, oh, like let's see what she does, you know, like just kind of like the explorational part of being a parent, where it's like let's see what our kid does when we're not watching her, you know, or when we're far away, when she doesn't think we're watching her. Also, this daughter totally has ADHD, in my opinion. Like, at least that's how I treated it in the music. So the tenors introduce the melody first, and there's a couple reasons. One is the tenors, I'm using them to represent the parents watching, and they're the ones describing the daughter in this moment. And also, let's see, the melody is presented iteratively first. So my daughter hurries. Whoops. My daughter hurries to finish. My daughter hurries to finish her sentence. It's like building on each previous statement is building on the next. Each statement is building on the previous one. And the idea is that this is to convey literally writing, like how you would write one word and then the next one and then etc. And then you look back and you've got, you know, a longer sentence every time you check. And it's also a very frantic melody. It's much faster than the texture around it. And that's to represent the daughter kind of really frantically trying to get this project done, and kind of how calm everything is around her, but she has a lot of energy and she's running around. Oh, and then here in the sand, the altos take the melody in this, and they have the melody for the rest of the thing in the sand. And so this, I was kind of seeing this like a movie scene, almost like the movie scene starts from the parents' POV, like looking at their daughter playing in the sand, and then the POV switches to the daughter, and then from then on you're in her world, and you're seeing all of that magic, and you're also seeing how high the stakes are from the perspective of this young girl, and the stakes are high. And to really hammer that perspective shift home, we've got the basses and tenors singing low stuff, and again I'm using this low frequency as an immersion tool to kind of like sink us in, to feel those lower notes in our body a little more, and to kind of put us in the daughter's perspective, in the daughter's mindset. Even though this poem is written from the parent's perspective, like I was really trying to figure out, how do I give the kid autonomy? Like, how do I give the daughter her, like her main character moment? And so that's kind of why I ended up going with the altos for almost all of it, because they're representing the daughter. And it's like, this is her, like, yes, the parents are telling you about it, but it's the daughter's, it's her brilliance, it's her genius, it's her choices that are making this whole thing happen. Before waves climb up the shore. So she's trying to get all this stuff written out before the tide comes in and washes it all away. And so we've got this this motif, this melodic shape of literally like the notes climbing up to represent the waves climbing up. and it's staggered between the sopranos and altos, and it's back and forth while the tenors and basses keep the chords going. And then we start it all over. She wants to spell out the names of what all the people she loves. And this girl is very sweet, and she loves a lot of people. And so I've got the altos, they split and they stagger this of all the people she loves, all the people she loves, of all the people she loves. Again, for her, the stakes are very high, so she has to make this decision. She's like, I want to fit everyone in on the list before the tide washes these words away. But the closer the water gets, again, the rising tide motif here as the water gets closer. So here she realizes that she's trying to write these sentences in the sand, but the water is coming in. And so she's going to have to shorten her sentence, which is really tough for her because she wanted to write all of the names of the people she loved. But now she's being faced with, again, very high stakes, like this impossible decision of all the people I love, who do I leave off this list? To convey that, we've got the tempo a little faster, and these triplets from earlier, they're just running and running, and they're nonstop. And then we have this line, it's hunger boundless, which is talking about the tide. And the way that's conveyed here is that the tenors and basses slowly, over this whole coda, they are just repeating it's hunger boundless, and more parts are coming in and it's getting louder and louder. And the idea is that even though she's trying her best, with the sopranos and altos, she's trying her best to get all the names written down, the water is not stopping. It's this theme of inevitability that keeps coming back. So it's just more and more and more. So what we have aleatoric chanting of sandflies and mosquito hawks. And I actually took trawling motors out. I think I'm in the wrong draft of the score. But the idea is these are chanted, all the singers are singing them at different times, and the idea is it's giving the buzz of like insects going around your head, which is like, that's such a Bayou sitch, is that there's bugs everywhere. Water going brown, then to froth. These are like small wave phrase shapes. Water going brown, then to froth. Yeah, it's subtle, but it's just like the phrase shape is of water coming in and coming out. Lord of fin and wing and prayer, hold me here as long as you can. So for this line, I actually did just some standard polyphony. So I had one voice sing the theme, and then I had other voices sing it in slightly altered versions, and then it all comes together into a long section of polyphony. And my idea in doing this is that, one, it's a prayer. Lord, it starts with Lord, literally, so it's a prayer, and polyphony is like, that's very church, it's very church vibes, and so it's to convey the prayer-like nature of this request. And then it also conveys the request of, hold me here as long as you can, like trying really hard to stay in this moment as long as possible. And so the polyphony is literally the spinning out, the continuation of a single, maybe two, but of a melodic theme, and like trying to just use it as many ways as possible and to stay with just that theme as long as you possibly can. Hold me here, again, we're holding these notes as long as we can. This one's really cool, as long as you can, but the fact that as long as you can is literally held until the very end of the song. You kind of forget about it because it goes to a hum, so it floats away, but it's like we're still, even despite all like the water coming in, which again is that's this phrase shape here, before the water shifts, brings its salt, and the phrase shape that is a metaphor for the tide coming in and out. Over all of that, we're trying to stay. This note stays. We're holding on to that. Yeah, and that's how the song ends. This song is mourning an indigenous community who their land was submerged, due to climate change, due to coastal land erosion. So this first part here is in unison, and it's strong, and it's to represent that community. Countless storms, the way it stretches out here, that's a throwback to some other score thing. Salvaging the whole island's memory. We have the split here because it conveys, individuals amongst the community and how they all have their own memories that are being lost. Of course, storms. We got a tritone in here, I think. A, D sharp, yeah. Spreading them out to dry in the sun. Literally, everyone's on the same C sharp, and then we spread out into this chord that I really like, F sharp minor 9. F sharp minor with a 9, which to me just feels, that chord just feels like being in, like, heat. It just feels like heat and dryness. So that, and especially with the minor second up here, which is kept on a hum, which kind of convey this uneasiness. Again, we have the Morse code articulation that I like because this is just information. This is such a terrible thing. It doesn't really need over dramatization. Like we just need to tell you about it, and it's bad enough. Think only of Island Road. So Island Road was the central road to this indigenous community, and so we have a key change here, a modulation to something more major because it's like fondly reflecting on the community. Think only of Island Road. How the road once offered the one way to school or town or places past the horizon. So a lot of stuff going on right here. This whole 5 bars is a throwback to movement 3. The lagging rhythm of the kid like always being late to throw the ball, that's here in to school. And then the horizon, that voicing, even though it's a different chord here, the voicing is very similar with the minor second, descending melody on the high note in the sopranos. But we've changed the chord to a much darker minor chord, and what was previously a kind of hopeful, beautiful dissonance is now this kind of dark dissonance, and it's up top, and it's like it's the primary thing as opposed to when it was buried in the previous chord. And my idea in doing that is that it's like the narrator is thinking about how his kids have a future and how they have these opportunities, and how they're kept safe in a way from certain dangers or whatever. But the kids of this community, they don't have that. And so the horizon for them looks very different. It's not a horizon of hope. It's a horizon of inevitable doom, more or less, of dread. Soon enough, there will be no way back along this road. Okay, anyone who drives around the barricade on the mainland will find waves at the end of Blacktop. So this is about getting to the end of the little bit of road that still exists in that town and how it just literally goes off into water. And so the sopranos and altos are kind of representing the memories of what once was there and the sound of the wind and stuff like that. And the tenors and basses are the waves underneath. So waves at the end of Blacktop. And the sentences are completing each other because it's like the interconnectedness of the ghosts of these memories with the destruction that coastal erosion has had. And we play with that texture of that we play with that tide like texture getting bigger and bigger until the line "Wind where there once was song," which is so beautiful. It's like thinking about a community that once was there, but now there's just silence. And so the way I reflect that in this song is that it's a big forte representing like all of the possibility in the community and the love and etc. And then on the word song, everyone switches to a hum. The bass, the low end drops out, and it's just a single or just a few sopranos on one note singing the word song as it floats off into the distance. And as the humming does what? The humming sinks slowly, lower and lower and lower, which literally represents, that community, and that home for those people slowly sinking into the water. So this movement is for a soloist primarily because it's just like, it's literally like a kid thinking, this is something that so many people, I think, who still live in their hometowns, they think about, especially when they're growing up, in their late teen years, but they think about leaving, and exploring something new. And so it's a solo moment because it's like this kid differentiating himself from the community. And it also conveys like the emotional and kind of isolating implications of living in a small town and wanting to leave. But then eventually, here everybody comes in and sings along because even though it feels lonely, it's a common sentiment, and it's something that could be shared actually. And so it's even though this kid feels alone, he's not alone. In a way, he is. And the last movement, what a slow breath. This is fast. What a slow breath. And then it's slower because we're like, it's like kind of catching yourself, and like it's almost like trying to slow down your breathing. And so it's fast at first to give contrast for slow later. There's audible exhales here. What a slow breath. Just the sound of breathing, but also the sound of like nature and the breath being one with nature, like life force and stuff like that. The major second is here. Again, the major second that I've been using to convey light is here now to convey life, as in the light of life. And it also is foreshadowing what happens in the next line, which is the sun rises. Let out from the porch as the sun rises. This is my favorite moment of the whole piece, but it's the voices singing in these passing tones create these dissonances that to me really feel and sound like the light, different moments of light peeking over the horizon as it finally comes up into a beautiful sunrise. And of course there are major seconds, all throughout that, as we've used earlier to represent light, like G and A and others. Over pine trees, a long phrase to, convey the arc of the sun. Yeah, it's just ascending motion, a lot of movement to convey the sun rising and the world kind of waking up in this moment. Teaching our daughter to brown rue without burning flower. And there are these hums here, which to me, it kind of represents like breath in life, but I also think it's kind of cute to think of it as like smelling the rue being cooked. And it's like almost like a yum yum, like a yum kind of thing. Even though that's not the intention. The intention is that it's just like kind of a warm receding into family, which is the thematic close of the suite. And it's represented, musically by hopping off of words, hopping off this attempt to articulate life and what it means, and instead, or not regressing, but re-entering and reinvesting in your family and the community around you is kind of the moral that I'm taking from it. Like breath equals presence. Like to breathe is to be present, and using this idea of being present as an antidote to the inevitability of time passing, which is the big antagonist kind of in this suite, and that the answer is to, well, yeah, time will pass, so be present when you can and enjoy where you are and the people you're there with. Yeah, and that's the whole piece.